The alley smelled of oil and desperation, but for Eli, it was home. At 17, he'd learned to sleep lightly, one hand on the knife tucked in his frayed jacket, the other clutching a dream he barely believed in anymore. Tonight, though, something stirred, a low rumble that wasn't just another Chicago storm. Eli peeked from behind the dumpster, his heart pounding. A Harley Davidson, sleek and black, rolled into the alley, its engine coughing like a wounded animal. The rider, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-20s with a leather vest and a short beard, swore under his breath as the bike sputtered to a stop. Eli's first instinct was to shrink back. Strangers meant trouble, but the bike's whine pulled him forward. He'd always loved machines, the way they made sense when nothing else did. "Hey!" Eli called, his voice cracking from disuse. "Sounds like your fuel line's clogged." The man's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Eli froze, realizing he'd just stepped into a spotlight he hadn't meant to claim. But the man's gaze softened, taking in Eli's dirt-streaked face and the too big jacket hanging off his slight frame. "You know bikes?" the man asked, his voice gruff but curious. He introduced himself as Caleb, a mechanic by trade and a member of the Iron Wings, a local biker crew. Eli nodded, his fingers itching to touch the Harley. He'd learned engines from his dad before everything fell apart, before the fights, the coming out, the door slamming shut behind him at 15. Caleb gestured to the bike. "Show me." Eli hesitated, then knelt beside the Harley, his hands moving with a confidence he hadn't felt in years. He traced the fuel line, found the blockage, and used a borrowed wrench to free it. The engine roared back to life, and Caleb let out a low whistle. "Kid, you've got a gift." Eli shrugged, wiping his hands on his jeans, but his chest warmed at the praise. Caleb offered him a granola bar from his pocket, and they sat on the curb, talking bikes under the flickering streetlight. Eli didn't mention he hadn't eaten in 2 days or that he was gay. Nobody needed to know that part. Not yet. The next morning, Eli woke to the sound of engines. Dozens of them. He scrambled to his feet, heart racing, as the alley filled with bikes. The Iron Wings had come, over 100 strong, their leather vests emblazoned with a winged skull. Caleb stood at the front, holding a black leather jacket with the club's patch. "You fixed my ride," he said, his voice carrying over the rumble. "We don't forget our own." Eli's throat tightened. He'd never been anyone's own. But as he took the jacket, the weight of it felt like armor, like belonging. The bikers cheered, and for the first time in years, Eli didn't feel invisible. He didn't know then that this was only the beginning, or that Caleb's smile held more than gratitude. The Iron Wings clubhouse was a squat brick building on the edge of Chicago's South Side, filled with the smell of motor oil and cheap beer. Eli followed Caleb inside, the jacket heavy on his shoulders. The crew was a mix of ages and backgrounds. Men and women, black, white, Latino, all bound by their love of the road. They welcomed Eli with slaps on the back and questions about engines, but he kept his guard up. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Caleb showed him to a cot in the back room. "Crash here tonight," he said. "We'll figure out tomorrow." Eli nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. He lay awake that night, listening to the hum of the city, wondering if this was a fluke or a lifeline. He thought of Caleb's easy laugh, the way his hazel eyes lingered a moment too long. Eli pushed the thought away. He'd learned the hard way that hope could hurt worse than hunger. Over the next week, Eli worked in the clubhouse garage, fixing bikes and learning the crew's rhythms. He was good, better than good, and the bikers noticed. They called him Wrench, a nickname that felt like a badge. But Eli still felt like an outsider, waiting for the catch. He'd seen how people turned when they learned he was gay. His dad had called it a sin. His mom had just looked away. He wasn't ready to risk this new home. Caleb, though, was different. He'd sit with Eli after hours, sharing stories of rides across the country, his voice low and warm. One night, as they cleaned tools side by side, Caleb's hand brushed Eli's. It was brief, accidental, but Eli's heart stuttered. He glanced at Caleb, who didn't pull away, just smiled softly. "You're safe here, Eli," he said. "No matter what." Eli wanted to believe him, but safety was a promise life had broken too many times. The clubhouse became Eli's world, but it wasn't a fairy tale. Some of the iron wings were rough around the edges, quick to judge, slow to trust. A burly biker named Torque, with tattoos snaking up his arms, watched Eli like a hawk, muttering about kids who don't earn their keep. Eli ignored him, focusing on the bikes. Engines didn't care who you loved or where you slept. Caleb was his anchor. They'd work late, rebuilding a carburetor or tuning an engine, their conversation weaving between spark plugs and dreams. Caleb talked about his sister, who died young, and how the iron wings had pulled him through. Eli shared bits of his past, his dad's garage the night he was kicked out, but he stopped short of the full truth. Caleb didn't push, but his quiet presence made Eli feel seen in a way that scared him. One evening, as they sat on the clubhouse roof, watching the city lights, Caleb handed Eli a soda. "You ever think about what you want long-term?" he asked. Eli stared at the can, his fingers tracing the cold metal. "I don't know," he admitted. "I never thought I'd get this far." Caleb's hand rested on his shoulder, steady and warm. "You've got time, Wrench, and you've got us." Eli's chest ached. He wanted to lean into Caleb, to let the walls he'd built crumble, but fear held him back. He'd seen the way some of the bikers talked about outsiders. What would they say if they knew? He pulled away, muttering about needing sleep, and Caleb let him go, his eyes shadowed with something unspoken. The next day, trouble came. A rival crew, the Black Vipers, rolled into the Iron Wings territory, demanding a cut of their repair business. The clubhouse buzzed with tension as the bikers gathered, Torque's voice loudest, pushing for a fight. Eli overheard him sneer, "We don't need some street kids slowing us down." Caleb shot back, "That kid's worth 10 of you." Eli's face burned, but he stayed quiet, tinkering with a bike in the corner. The standoff with the Vipers ended without blood, but the threat lingered. Eli felt the weight of Torque's distrust, the pressure to prove himself. He threw himself into work, fixing bikes faster than anyone, but the whispers followed. One night, Torque cornered him in the garage. "You don't belong here, kid," he growled. "You're hiding something. I can tell." Eli's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "I fix your bikes, don't I? That's what matters." Torque scoffed, walking away, but the words stung. Eli wondered how long he could keep his secret, and whether Caleb would still stand by him if it came out. That night, Caleb found Eli sitting alone, staring at the Harley he'd fixed that first day. "Torque's an ass," Caleb said, sitting beside him. "He's scared of anyone who doesn't fit his mold." Eli nodded, but his throat was tight. "What if I don't fit?" he whispered. Caleb's hand found his, squeezing gently. "You fit with me." The touch sent a jolt through Eli, and for a moment, he let himself feel it, the possibility of something more. But the fear was still there, a shadow he couldn't outrun. The tension with the Black Vipers escalated, pulling the Iron Wings into late-night strategy sessions. Eli listened from the sidelines, learning the stakes. Territory, pride, survival. He wasn't a fighter, but he could keep the bikes running, and that was enough to earn nods from most of the crew. Except Torque, whose glares grew sharper. Caleb kept Eli close, teaching him to ride. On a quiet Sunday, they took a battered old Harley to an empty lot, Caleb's hands guiding Eli's on the throttle. "Feel the road," Caleb said, his breath warm against Eli's ear. Eli's heart raced, not just from the bike. When he finally rode solo, the wind in his hair felt like freedom. Caleb's proud grin was even better. But freedom came with a price. One night, Eli overheard Torque talking to a group of bikers, his voice low and venomous. "That kid's too soft. Bet he's one of those." The word hit Eli like a punch. He slipped away before anyone saw him, his hands shaking as he worked on a bike. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. Someone had noticed the way he looked at Caleb. The next day, Caleb took Eli to a diner, away from the clubhouse's noise. Over greasy burgers, Caleb's knee brushed Eli's under the table, and neither moved away. "You're quieter lately," Caleb said. Eli stared at his fries, the truth clawing at his throat. "I'm gay," he blurted, his voice barely audible. He braced for rejection, but Caleb just smiled. "Yeah, I figured. Doesn't change a thing." Eli's eyes stung. He wanted to believe it, but Torque's words echoed in his mind. "The others might not feel that way," he said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "They'll learn or they'll answer to me." The promise was fierce, but Eli knew it wasn't that simple. The Iron Wings were family, but family could turn on you. Back at the clubhouse, the Vipers struck. A firebomb hit the garage, flames licking the walls where Eli's cot sat. The bikers scrambled, dousing the fire, but 2 bikes were ruined. Torque pointed at Eli, his voice booming. "This is what happens when we let strays in." Eli's stomach dropped, but Caleb stepped between them, his fists clenched. "Back off, Torque. He's one of us." The crew was divided. Some backed Caleb, others sided with Torque, muttering about loyalty and trust. Eli felt like he was drowning. He'd found a home, only to risk losing it again. That night, he packed his few belongings, ready to run, but Caleb stopped him at the door. "Don't go," he said, his voice raw. "We're stronger with you." Eli stayed, but the doubt lingered. He didn't know if he was fighting for a place or for Caleb, or if he could have both. The fire left scars, on the garage, on the crew, on Eli's fragile hope. The Iron Wings doubled down, patrolling their territory, but the Vipers were relentless, slashing tires and leaving threats spray-painted on the clubhouse walls. Eli worked harder, rebuilding what was broken, but Torque's accusations hung over him like smoke. Caleb was a constant, his presence a shield. One night, as they sat on the roof again, Caleb took Eli's hand, his thumb tracing circles on Eli's palm. "I'm not good at this," Caleb said, his voice low. "But I care about you. More than I should, maybe." Eli's breath caught. He leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a spark igniting. It was brief, tentative, but it burned through Eli's fear, leaving only want. They didn't talk about it after, but something shifted. Caleb's touches lingered, his smiles softer. Eli felt alive, but the clubhouse wasn't a bubble. Torque caught them one morning, Caleb's arm around Eli's shoulders. "Knew it," Torque spat. "You're gonna ruin us." He stormed off and Eli's stomach churned. He'd been here before. Love leading to loss. The Vipers struck again, this time at a bike rally. The Iron Wings arrived to find their banners torn down, their bikes vandalized. A fight broke out, fists and chains flying. Eli stayed back, helping an injured biker, but Torque's voice cut through the chaos. "This is on you, wrench," he yelled, blaming Eli for the crew's distraction. Caleb pulled Eli aside, his face fierce. "He's wrong. You're the best thing that's happened to us." But Eli wasn't sure. He'd brought trouble, just like his dad had said. That night, he told Caleb he was leaving. "I'm not worth this," Eli said, his voice breaking. Caleb grabbed his shoulders. "You're worth everything. Stay. Fight for this for us." Eli nodded, tears falling. He wanted to believe he could belong, but the Vipers weren't done, and neither was Torque. The crew was fracturing, and Eli felt like the fault line. The final clash came on a cold Chicago night. The Vipers ambushed the Iron Wings clubhouse, engines roaring like a storm. Eli grabbed a wrench, ready to defend the only home he'd known, but Caleb pulled him back. "Stay safe," he whispered, before joining the fight. The brawl was brutal. Broken glass, bloodied knuckles, bikes toppling. Eli watched from the garage, his heart in his throat as Caleb took a hit. Then Torque appeared, his face a mask of rage. "This is your fault, kid," he shouted, advancing. But before he could strike, another biker, a quiet woman named Lena, stepped in. "Enough," she said. "Eli's family. You're the one tearing us apart." The words hit harder than any punch. Torque froze, and in that moment, the fight turned. The Iron Wings rallied, driving the Vipers back. When the dust settled, the clubhouse stood, battered but whole. Caleb, bruised but standing, pulled Eli into a hug. "You're still here," he said, relief in his voice. The next day, the crew gathered. Torque stood before them, his head bowed. "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough. "Wrench, you're one of us. Doesn't matter who you love." He held out a new patch for Eli's jacket, a gesture of peace. The crew cheered, and Eli felt the weight of years lift. He wasn't just a kid with a wrench anymore, he was home. Months later, Eli and Caleb rode together, the city lights blurring past. The Iron Wings had grown stronger, united by the fight and by Eli's quiet courage. At a stoplight, Caleb leaned over, kissing Eli softly. "You fixed more than my bike," he said. Eli smiled, the jacket on his shoulders feeling lighter than ever. They weren't perfect, and neither was the world. But in that moment, Eli knew he'd found a family. Not just in the Iron Wings, but in Caleb's arms. Love, like a well-tuned engine, could carry you far, even when the road was rough.